Should you upgrade to iPhone 14?
Apple's iPhone 14, iPhone 14 Plus and iPhone 14 Pro phones are all now available. With that in mind, you may be wondering, should you upgrade to the iPhone 14? Above all else, the answer depends on which phone you currently own. If you have a recent model like the iPhone 13 or 12, you should wait. If your phone is older though, it's worth figuring out how much you'll gain by jumping to a newer iPhone. The $799 iPhone 14 brings modest improvements that are appreciated but not game-changing, like nitty-gritty camera improvements, car crash detection and the support for satellite-based emergency messaging. The iPhone 14 also has a new internal design with easier access to internal components, making it easier to repair than previous models. The iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max's upgrades are more dramatic, but you still don't need to upgrade unless you can score a great trade-in deal. Apple saved its most interesting new features for the Pro lineup, including the dynamic island that replaces the notch, the new A16 Bionic processor and a 48-megapixel main camera sensor. It's important to remember that you don't have to buy the iPhone 14 to get camera, battery and performance improvements over an earlier iPhone. Purchasing decisions will always vary depending on budget, how well your phone works right now and your personal needs, so there's no simple answer that works for everyone. But here are the biggest differences between the iPhone 14 lineup and previous iPhone generations to help you make a decision. iPhone 14 versus iPhone 13, 13 Pro, 13 Pro Max. The iPhone 14 lineup introduces new features such as car crash detection, the removal of the physical SIM card for US phones, and enhanced cameras on the rear and front. Despite those changes, iPhone 14 isn't different enough to justify upgrading from the iPhone 13. And even though Apple finally got rid of the infamous notch in the Pro models, the 14 and 14 Plus still have one. It's the same smaller notch that debuted on the iPhone 13 series. In fact, the iPhone 14 represents one of the most minimal year-over-year upgrades in Apple's history, according to CNET's Patrick Holland, who reviewed Apple's latest phones. The iPhone 14 and iPhone 14 Plus have the A15 Bionic chip from last year's iPhone 13 Pro and iPhone 13 Pro Max. The 14's screen looks exactly like the one on the 13. Perhaps the most prominent change this year is the introduction of a larger version of the iPhone 14 called the iPhone 14 Plus, which has a 6.7-inch screen like the Pro Max. That means you no longer have to splurge on Apple's most expensive iPhone if you want the largest screen possible. Of course, the iPhone 14 is still highly rated, but we recommend saving your money and skipping the upgrade. If you've made up your mind to upgrade, we suggest going for an iPhone 14 Pro or iPhone 14 Pro Max if you can afford it. These phones are expensive, but buys you access to some salient changes, namely a high refresh rate display, Apple's new Dynamic Island multitasking bar, an always-on display as well as better cameras among other features. The bottom line, if you have an iPhone 13 or 13 Pro, don't upgrade. But if you are determined to get a new phone, go for the iPhone 14 Pro or 14 Pro Max, especially if you must have the Dynamic Island right now. iPhone 14 versus iPhone 12, 12 Pro. Even though the iPhone 12 lineup was released 2 years ago, it still shares many similarities with Apple's latest phones. Both the iPhone 12 and iPhone 14 support 5G, run on fast processors, offer great cameras and include MagSafe accessory compatibility. Since the iPhone 14 is more of a refresh than a major upgrade, we recommend hanging on to your iPhone 12 if it's still in good condition. You can take advantage of the iPhone's latest software features such as lock screen customizations, widgets and the ability to unsend text messages by upgrading to iOS 16. The iPhone 14 received a few notable camera upgrades, like a larger sensor, a new lens with a faster aperture, improved photo processing and action mode which makes the movements in videos look smoother when you record them. But the iPhone 12's cameras remain excellent even though they are 2 years old. The iPhone 12 has a 12-megapixel dual camera system, while the iPhone 12 Pro includes a third camera with a telephoto lens. It's worth remembering that you get more noticeable upgrades with the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max. These include everything that's new in the 14, as well as an upgraded main camera with a larger 48-megapixel sensor, an ultra-wide camera that allows you to take macro photos and a third camera with a telephoto lens. If you can get a good trade-in deal that significantly knocks down the iPhone 14 Pro's price, upgrading from the regular iPhone 12 is a decent step up. The bottom line, hold on to your iPhone 12 for another year since the iPhone 14 isn't dramatically different. However, the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max bring more significant changes that could be worthwhile if you can snag a good trade-in deal. iPhone 14 versus iPhone 11, 11 Pro. If you're using an iPhone 11, we recommend upgrading to an iPhone 14, or even an iPhone 13. In the last 3 years, Apple has made enough changes to features including battery life, performance, screen quality, cameras and durability to merit buying a new iPhone. Upgrading to the iPhone 14 will get you 5G support, more storage, 128GB at the base level versus 64GB, a better main camera with a wider aperture lens, new video shooting options like action mode and cinematic mode, a better selfie camera with night mode and Apple's photonic engine processing, compatibility with Apple's MagSafe accessories, longer battery life and faster performance. That's in addition to car crash detection and Apple's new emergency satellite messaging feature. Most of the photography and videography improvements are dramatic changes compared to the iPhone 11. And the longer battery life and additional storage space are welcomed upgrades that you'll notice on a daily basis. As previously mentioned, if you go for the 14 Pro instead, you get a new 48-megapixel main camera, a closer 3x optical zoom versus the 11 Pro Max's 2x zoom, the dynamic island instead of the notch and numerous other upgrades like an always-on display. The bottom line, the iPhone 14 lineup includes enough changes to justify upgrading from the iPhone 11. But if your phone is still in good condition and you're satisfied with it, install iOS 16 and hold on to it for another year. iPhone 14 versus iPhone XS, XS Max, XR. If you bought the iPhone XS, XS Max or XR at launch, that means your phone is roughly 4 years old and may be starting to feel sluggish. That alone makes a strong case for upgrading, but there's plenty more to gain. Compared to the iPhone XS, the iPhone 14 provides 6 hours of additional battery life, according to Apple's estimates. In addition to everything that's new in the iPhone 14 specifically, you'll also get other upgrades Apple has added to the iPhone over the past few years. Those include 5G support, more storage, again. You get 128GB versus 64GB, faster performance and a better camera. The iPhone XS generation lacks night mode for taking clearer pictures in the dark, and it also doesn't have Deep Fusion, which is Apple's name for its image processing technique that improves detail and clarity in darker environments. The XS's front camera has a lower 7-megapixel resolution compared to the larger and newer 12-megapixel sensor on the iPhone 14. If you're upgrading from an iPhone XR, you'll also get an additional camera with an ultra-wide lens for taking broader group shots for the first time. The iPhone 14 also has a larger 6.1-inch screen compared to the iPhone XS 5.8-inch display. The iPhone XS Max has a 6.5-inch screen, while the XR's screen is also 6.1 inches. The design has also changed quite a bit over the past 4 years. Newer models have flat edges, a slightly smaller notch, different finishes and a new squircle-shaped camera module that replaces the pill-shaped rear camera cutout. So your phone will not only feel more modern, but it'll look newer, too. The bottom line, if you have an iPhone XS, XS Max or XR, it's definitely worth upgrading. You get a noticeable boost in camera quality, battery life and performance among other areas. iPhone 14 versus iPhone X. The iPhone X is about 5 years old, which means it probably feels slow and its battery life isn't what it used to be. With an iPhone 14, you'll notice a major upgrade in both categories, as well as design, improved durability, connectivity and camera quality. Let's start with performance. The iPhone X runs on a much older A11 Bionic chip that's now 5 years old, while the iPhone 14 runs on Apple's A15 Bionic processor. The iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max run on Apple's newer A16 Bionic chip. Both new processors are way ahead of the A11 chip, which only has a 2-core neural engine compared to the A15 Bionic's 16-core neural engine. The iPhone's neural engine powers tasks that rely on machine learning and artificial intelligence, which are becoming a bigger part of the iPhone experience. Things like app suggestions in the app library and Apple's Translate app rely on machine learning to function, which indicates that the iPhone X may struggle to keep up with newer capabilities. The iPhone X also has a dual-lens camera similar to that of the iPhone XS, meaning it's missing the iPhone 14's camera hardware improvements in addition to night mode, Deep Fusion and the ability to control depth of field and blur levels in portrait mode. Like the iPhone XS, you're only getting a 7-megapixel front camera compared to a 12-megapixel selfie camera on Apple's newer phones. Apple's 5-year-old iPhone also has shorter battery life, with Apple estimating it should last for 13 hours when playing back video compared to 20 hours on the iPhone 14. The iPhone 14's 6.1-inch screen is bigger than the 5.8-inch display on the iPhone 10, and it should also be brighter since it can reach 800 nits of max brightness compared to the iPhone 10's 625 nit screen. The iPhone 14 supports Dolby Atmos and spatial audio playback, while the iPhone 10 just has stereo playback. That's probably not a deal breaker, but might be crucial if you watch a lot of video on your phone without headphones. And of course, there's the benefit of getting car crash detection, Apple's new emergency SOS messaging via satellite option, better water resistance, up to 6 meters for 30 minutes versus 1 meter, 5G support, more storage space, ceramic shield for the display, a refreshed design and the option to use MagSafe accessories on the iPhone 14. The bottom line, if you have the iPhone 10, it's time to upgrade. The iPhone 14 will feel new in just about every way, from the camera to performance, battery life and the way it looks and feels.
Alright friends, so that was our comprehensive comparison of iPhone 14 with all its previous 4 generation models. Hope you guys found the video informative. Please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. Until next time, goodbye.